Well, thank you, Dennis. Numbers to determine the order in which they will be making their opening remarks. Closing remarks will be made in reverse order. I'm going to introduce you to the candidates in the order of their opening remarks. First, Green Party candidate Jonathan McFarland. Democrat Jason Kander. Libertarian Jonathan Dine. Constitution Party candidate Fred Ryman. And Republican Roy Blunt. After their opening statements, I will ask the first question. Then we will proceed to questions from our three panelists. Our three panelists today are Ken Newton of the St. Joseph News Press, Carol Stark of the Joplin Globe, and Bill Miller of the Washington Missourian. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. After each has had a turn, I will decide whether any rebuttal time is necessary. If so, candidates will receive an additional 30 seconds for rebuttal, but rebuttals will be reserved only for those particular candidates involved in an attack. If a candidate fails to answer a question, I also reserve the right to prod them to try again. Signs will be held up in the front row showing the time remaining during the remarks. Candidates, please adhere to the stop signs. And audience, please hold your applause until today's event is over. With that, let's begin. Fred Ryman.
Our founding fathers had a dream, a nation of free men where power resided with we the people. And yet at the same time, they understood human nature. They understood that to secure the blessings of liberty, they had to create a government that would protect us primarily from our own government. Every man who seeks to expand the size or the power of our federal government betrays those founding principles. The mere desire for a strong, centralized federal government shows either one's ignorance of human nature or one's wicked intent. The job of a U.S. senator is to represent the interest of his state, to protect states' rights, to restrain or even roll back the ever-growing federal tyranny. Obviously, I'm running because I don't think Senator Blunt has done a good job at that job. But we cannot hold Senator Blunt accountable by electing someone from the party who is even more subversive of those founding principles. I want to thank the Missouri Press Association for having this forum, for allowing us all to be here on equal footing. It is the one time where we will all have an equal voice, the same voice. And so I sincerely want to say thank you.
Roy Blunt. Okay, we'll now go to questions, and I will ask the first one. Whoever wins this election will have to work with Senator Claire McCaskill to represent Missouri. Senator McCaskill recently complained that the Senate was scheduled to work fewer days this year than at any time in the past 60 years. Do you view this as an indication that Washington literally is not working, that it is not addressing important issues? Or do you believe that this is a laudable display of limited government, that less is actually more in this case? Fred Ryman.
So far as fewer days worked, I would say that not only depends upon the Senate schedule, but it also depends upon the senator. Whether I am in Washington, D.C., or whether I am back home here in Missouri, I suspect that I will be working almost all of the time. You cannot simply go to Washington, D.C. and serve and stay there, and when you're off duty, you're off duty. You are always listening. You are always trying to get feedback from your constituents, and time not in Washington, D.C. should be spent working here at home.
Roy Blunt.
Well, I do think Mr. Ryman had a good sense of really what you do in this job, which has you both places a lot of the time. I've had.
The next question comes from Ken Newton.
Thank you to all the candidates for being here today. During the next 6 years, the Senate may be called upon to confirm more than one member of the U.S. Supreme Court, plus others in the federal judiciary. Can you please tell us about how you would approach your review of those nominees?
Fred Ryman.
Obviously, in looking to confirm justices, we look at their prior rulings. We want to make sure that they're constitutional. But frankly, Ken, I think your question maybe didn't even go far enough, because it's not simply about approving justices that we believe will rule constitutionally. We have justices and judges that are ruling from the bench in such a way that they are creating new law. The Senate should be working with the House, frankly, to impeach and remove justices that are going far beyond the bounds of what they should be doing. I can give you several examples. Kehoe versus the City of New London, an eminent domain lawsuit where the courts basically substituted public benefit for public use in determining whether property could be condemned and given to another individual, private individual. South Dakota versus Elizabeth Dole on issues of denial of funds, again. So we need to remove those that are not ruling according to the Constitution.
Roy Blunt. The next question comes from Carol Stark.
We get numerous reports that come across our desk every day that show the nationwide epidemic of prescription opioid abuse. How do you hope to stem the tide of prescription opioid abuse, especially in your own state, the only one without a prescription drug monitoring plan?
Fred Ryman.
Carol, I would kind of agree with the premise of your question in that you said Missouri does not have a way of tracking opioid use and abuse, and I think possibly some may disagree with me on that, but I would disagree that that is something that the federal government should be involved in. It is a state issue, and states should show responsibility in covering that, definitely.
The next question comes from Bill Miller.
In this campaign year, nationally, there's been talk about a free college education for every student. And I'd like to know how each of you feel about that. I'd like to know if you feel it's economically feasible to do something like that by the federal government without a huge raise in taxes.
Fred Ryman.
Well, Bill, this is going to also kind of go back to what Carol was talking about. No, I do not believe in giving away free college. We've seen what a free public education has done for our public education system. I used to be a teacher myself, so I'm not speaking from complete ignorance here. But free college, let me tell you, I went to college for 2 years. I maintained about a 3.2 GPA. When I went back to school at the age of 30 and had to pay for my own education, I maintained a 3.8 plus. And when I went back again at age 40, I maintained a 4.0. I got 2 degrees going back to college, putting myself through school. You appreciate what you have to pay for. But more than that, it's the general philosophy that's developing in this country where we look to the feds to solve all of our problems. And I'm sorry, but the federal government is not the solution to most of our problems. The federal government is the problem most of the time.
We're going to go to the next question here. Ken Newton.
Where do you stand in regard to undocumented residents in the country and giving them a path to citizenship? And along with this, how much of the nation's resources should be committed to strengthening border security?
Fred Ryman.
I've been hearing about comprehensive immigration reform since I was a teenager. That's about 40 years ago. And I'm sorry, but never once has Congress acted to secure the border. It has not happened in 40 years, and I don't look forward to it happening anytime soon, as long as we have the same crowd talking the same language. One of the things that we have to do in order to secure the border is not just build a wall across the border. That's something that politicians do to make it look like they're doing something. And all they're really doing is wasting our money. What we need to do is to turn off the magnets that are drawing people across the border in the first place. The real criminals are not the people that are crossing the border trying to feed their families. The real criminals are the companies that are hiring illegal immigrants against the law underpaying them, and we're taking no action at all against them, almost no action at all. I would say we need to beef up the penalties, not only enforce what laws are on the books, but beef up those penalties. There's something called the drug kingpin law that would apply in this situation in an interesting way.
Next question from Carol Stark.
On Wednesday, after months of infighting, Congress finally approved $1.1 billion in funding to pay for the fight against the Zika virus, which has now spread into the United States and has infected some pregnant women. Do you think Congress has waited too long to attack this problem?
Fred Ryman.
The Zika virus issue is another one of those that I see kind of crosses over the line between state responsibility and federal responsibility. We do have a Center for Disease Control that can speak to such issues, but as was said, I don't think we're going to find a cure for the Zika virus, certainly not in a matter of weeks. So that becomes more an issue of controlling the spread of the virus, which has to do more with killing mosquitoes than controlling a disease. And again, that is something that I believe that the state or even local municipalities are better equipped to deal with. Could it be coordinated at a federal level? Possibly, but where's the federal jurisdiction beyond actually trying to cure the disease itself? I don't see one. The federal government is not going to get into pest control, I'm sorry.
We have time for one more question, and this is going to come from you, Bill Miller.
We have all been viewing quite a few TV ads where the candidate is using a rifle and taking it apart and putting it back and so on. And I have heard comments from Missourians that they really feel that's an insult to their intelligence to think that being able to handle a gun, shoot a gun, take it apart, and so on is proper preparation for serving in government.
Fred Ryman.
I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I do not believe that the Second Amendment is there for us for sporting or for hunt, and it is more for our defense, not only of our family, but also for our self-defense against our own government, if you want to read Federalist Paper number 46. But I've got a long-winded explanation of my support of the Second Amendment on my website, voteforfred.org. I want to say, with the remainder of my time, that I'm disappointed that we never got to trade, because I think that trade is a hugely important issue with respect to jobs here in the United States. Senator Blunt voted to fast-track the TPP, and I'm sorry, but free trade with underdeveloped nations kills American jobs, kills local tax bases. And I would definitely say free trade with relatively equal countries is one thing, but free trade with depressed countries absolutely kills us economically.
We're going to move now to closing statements. Fred Ryman.
I believe the desire of most Americans is to just be left alone, to live our lives and run our businesses, as long as we don't bring harm to anyone else. We're fed up with the overreaching, over-regulating federal tyranny. We are fed up with lifelong politicians who rule over us instead of representing us and then going home. Like Senator Blunt, who's enriched himself and his family in what should be public service. And yet he pulls money out of your pocket and mine to fund the barbaric practices of Planned Parenthood, to fund social benefits for illegal immigrants, to fund green projects in foreign nations, to fund more and more and more bureaucracy. I believe this election, more than most in recent times, is about one thing: accountability. But you can't hold Senator Blunt accountable by electing someone from the even bigger spending party, by electing someone from the even more pro-abortion party, by electing someone from the even bigger government party. I stand here representing the Constitution Party of America. And these guys will tell you that a vote for a third-party candidate is a wasted vote. So let me ask you all, how much more wasted could your vote possibly be than to be cast yet again for the two parties that have given us $20 trillion in national debt. This time, when folks step into the voting booth, I want them to remember just how wasted their vote was last time. And this time, if you're going to waste your vote, waste it on me. Vote the Constitution Party, vote for Fred. Thank you.
It's a new slogan.
Well, that concludes the U.S. Senate Candidate Forum hosted by the Missouri Press Association. Let's give our candidates a round of applause.